Welcome to the 60 Plus Best Life podcast. We know that being in your 60s doesn't mean being over the hill anymore, and that, in fact, for many of us, the 60s feel more like a time of bright new beginnings, but with the added benefit of decades of wisdom and perspective. We also know that being in this time of life poses many questions and anxieties. We're happy to bring you conversations with those who have taken actions to create or enhance their lives to experience as much vitality, accomplishment, and purpose as possible by embracing change and the challenges in front of them. You'll also learn from health and wellness professionals, creators, and visionaries who are making life at 60 plus the best time of life. Join me, Daisy Swan, and Kimberly Fowler as we explore this life stage rich with possibility, depth, and new beginnings. By liking, subscribing, and forwarding this podcast, you'll be increasing the awareness that indeed the 60s and beyond hold so much more opportunity for enhanced health, personal growth, income, adventure, and satisfaction as well. Let's change those outdated perceptions that being in your 60s spells old age for good. Hi, everybody, and welcome to 60 Plus Best Life. We are so excited today to have Evan Harrel and Laura Berland, personally two good friends of mine, and I'm so delighted that they're joining us. So an introduction of these two. Evan is the co-founder and chief operating officer of the Center for Compassionate Leadership. He leads the center's thought leadership efforts and integration of scientific and business research into the work of the center and the development and delivery of the center's leadership training programs. He has worked extensively in the public health field for all over the world and has taught about compassion to many other nonprofit and for-profit organizations. Prior to working in the nonprofit sector, Evan was an investment manager for over 20 years, where he managed a $30 billion equity mutual fund. He was awarded an MBA with distinction from Harvard Business School, and he has a BA from Princeton University. No slouch here. Laura is the founder and executive director of the nonprofit Center for Compassionate Leadership. And I'm so happy that I've gotten to see this wonderful organization from its infancy. So kudos to both of you for making this happen. Through community education and research, the center supports leaders as catalysts to open hearts and minds to our shared common humanity and to urgently develop solutions to global crises and suffering at scale. The center's groundbreaking approach brings evidence-based principles of modern leadership and the latest scientific research together with the wisdom of contemplative practices. Laura developed the center's research, proven compassionate leadership model, which has been the foundation for engaging thousands of leaders from over 60 countries to embrace the practice of compassion from the inside out. So fantastic. So I know Laura has lived many professional lives. For over 40 years, Laura has been a weaver of transformative organizations and experiences as a serial tech entrepreneur, Fortune 500 executive, meditation instructor, yoga therapist, master facilitator. I mean, the list goes on. And she is an alumna of Cornell University and New York University. And we're going to share links to the Center for Compassionate Leadership.org on our site in our show notes. So, because it's so wonderful that you're doing the work you are. And we've seen each other at many conferences. Wisdom 2.0 and Compassionate, I think, or Compassion at LinkedIn. So there's so many interesting things happening in this space now. And you're here not necessarily to talk about just the organization, but how you got here, both professionally and personally. I had thought of you two as wonderful guests for this 60 Plus Best Life podcast because of the transition I saw you all go through, starting more in the 50s. And, that's a big pivotal time, our 50s, our late 50s. Sometimes things catch us by surprise or where we see it coming sometimes. So I wonder if you would share with us, how this all happened for you. Tell us a little bit of that story, not to, open the can of worms too far, but whatever you're open to sharing.
Well, thank you, Daisy and Kim, for inviting us to share our story. I think we often look at each other and go, did this happen? On many levels, we have no idea. We really don't. We truly, really don't. in my late 50s and Evan's late 50s, we both had recently left, 30-year marriages, relationships, first families, and were fortunate enough to meet through the brilliant technology of some dating app and immediately, connected on a heart and soul level. And fortunately, our personal life sort of, got closer and closer together. And then we did what I never would have done in my 20s, which was live with somebody before I got married. But now, who cares? And everybody does it anyway, so that's all right. And then we got married 3 plus a few years ago, right before COVID. Yeah.
Was that right before, or was it even during? It was right before, huh?
It was February 20th, 2020.
Oh my God.
2020 at 2:22 in the afternoon. Not that we care about numerology, but we thought that would be fun. And we went to the local town hall, and the judge was like, "You want me to say this at what time exactly?" They were very accommodating. It was beautiful. And we had dinner. Evan has 2 biological sons. I have 1. And we had dinner with our 3 sons in Manhattan that night to celebrate. And we still haven't had really a honeymoon or a wedding party because COVID popped up right after.
So we left from there, and we went out to a conference in San Francisco that shut down early because of COVID. And from that moment on, the world was closed. Yeah. And so we went into getting married with a certain set of expectations, and nothing unfolded the way we would have thought. But at that point, the choice you have is, now what do you do? Just like what do you do when you find yourself at the age we did, newly single? And so it all ties together, and it all ties together to what do we do today? Because the world is going to be in front of us the way it is. And so, as Laura said, we do wake up and go, wow, how did this ever happen? But the path is never quite as straight or smooth as you think.
Yeah. Well, just to go down that path a little bit. I mean, what did you think your 60s would look like? I mean, when did you have, earlier in your 50s, did you have an idea? I mean, I know I had no friggin' idea. So, but I'm just curious, like, what did you think? Here you'd been in long marriages.
It's probably earlier in my 50s. I never imagined being divorced. I never thought that initial relationship was going to end, even though I knew in my heart it wasn't meant to continue. It was not as positive a relationship for me as I would have liked, but I did not have the capacity or the courage or the wherewithal, whatever you want to call it, to step out of that sort of structure, right? I just didn't see how I could step out of that form of life and start again as an older person in my 50s.
Right.
But eventually it got to the point where, all the firm ground underneath my feet just sort of broke away. And I had the realization that I could carry myself forward in a way that would enable me to enjoy all the things in life that I hadn't really been privy to yet.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just jump in for a sec. We were spending a fair amount of time. Laura and I went to high school together in outside of New York City in Westchester County, and so that's how we know each other. So go back a long time, but we really reconnected a lot about, I'm going to say 10 years ago or so. And so at that particular juncture in your life and mine, our mid 50s or so, mid to late 50s. I think we were both kind of in a overwhelm of uncertainty and trying to reprioritize a vision.
Yeah.
And then I got this call about this guy. Okay, so Evan, let's turn it over to you.
Well, no, I'm just as Laura said. I don't think I envisioned myself in a second marriage in my 60s. I was approaching my 30th anniversary, and I have a much older sister who was approaching her 50th anniversary, and so I had these visions of my life continuing on the path that I have, and then you have a big right turn. Sometimes it's as Laura described, because she decided she needed to do it, but it can come from any direction, unexpected direction, self-initiated direction. But the challenge becomes, now what? Because it's rarely the situation that you're going to go back and recreate what was there before. And everything that has come in my life up until now has brought me to this point and has contributed to this point. And so it's a challenge to be someone who's willing to learn from what happens, not be attached to the way things are, not be regretful for things that don't work out, and be willing to be resilient. And so
that sounds really good, but it was really hard.
It is really hard. I mean, that's the idea. Yeah. It's really easy to describe.
Yeah.
And it's much, much harder to do.
It's so harder to
go through it. Right. And so what would you say supported you? And, obviously we have listeners who are thinking, gosh, how do you find that resilience? Right. I mean, we know some physical activities that we do to develop physical resilience. We're yoga practitioners and many other physical athletic sports types of things. But what did you rely on, or what helped you as you went through that?
I think the exercise is an exercise in awakening or tapping into resources that already exist. We get so conditioned to our limitations, to the things that we can't do, the things that we should do, when really the answers in most cases are here. Now we aren't infinitely powerful. We can't overcome many diseases. We can't overcome it's hard. We're limited in how far we can overcome really deep traumas, but the answer is here. So to specifically answer your question, what do? I think you go inward. You go inward to try to find your own strength. And I think that in our media saturated life, we're given images that here, the solution is right over here, or the solution is out there somewhere. And so for me, it involved a process of just starting with myself first, and then looking outward.
And so you had some practices that you...
Yeah, I've been a meditator for 20 years. I took a 2-month sabbatical and went and worked as a housekeeper at a retreat center. And in my daily life here, I had a very in my most challenging times, I had a very regimented, simple schedule that just allowed me to not be overstimulated.
Right. To be able to connect with yourself.
And did it help to be working with each other? I mean,
well, that was prior to
them.
So
that,
that came later.
Much later.
And
what about you, Laura? What helped you?
Through the breaking down and breaking through.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah. Maybe there was just a point in life where I'm thinking of that moment. I don't know what movie it is where they yell out the window, "I can't take it anymore." You know?
Network.
Can't take it anymore. I just, I was literally coming, as much as I tried to like put all this energy into keeping things, as they were. The reality was I had been breaking apart for years and years and years, and ignoring all the signs of breaking apart and breaking down. And although some of them were very obvious, physical signs and emotional and mental signs, but, it true. So what gave me the strength to let go? I mean, as you know, I've had a very intense devotion to yoga and meditation for many decades. And it might have been in one of my yoga communities that I just felt finally, it was probably when I was going through some trauma training that I'm thinking back. And recognizing, like, I can't really be supportive to people if I'm not dealing with really face on naming and taking action against my own stuff.
Right.
And so I think there was a moment where I sort of like, the light bulb really went off, like, okay, I can and will do this because I really deserve to have love in my life and to have, this joy that I hear other people talking, like life is full of joy. Really, that really wasn't my experience on a day-to-day level. And I was like, time is ticking. I better get on this sooner rather than later, because 60 was out there. I think I finally made some of these choices right before I was 55, which was also a heavy marker, And as Evan said, went more deeply inside, more deeply opened into a sense of trust and knowingness that I'm sure was always there, sort of nudging me along to but not really had the opening to break through. And then it was like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And having that practice, the practices that were there as a platform or a support, it's tremendous. I know so many people, and I know we all do, who don't have that kind of contemplative practice. And so that might be something really new for them to consider. I know Kimberly's been a TM practitioner for a long time, and yoga, obviously. And but I think that's one of the most powerful things that we all share in terms of having that resilience. So
the two stories that we're telling both relate to, moments of some sort of break in the flow of our life. But we don't have to wait for something challenging to arise to respond with just a question around what is the longing that is arising? Where is it coming from? And just paying attention to that is enough in an everyday life that's going along smoothly as well.
Couldn't agree with you more. Yeah. So you both had these other careers, and I'm so eager to hear how you would say you made that transition. That's another thing that so many people in their 50s, well, throughout life, but 50s looking into 60s and coming into their 60s, like, what's the next move? So how would you say that developed for you? Because you've both made a pretty big change.
My life in technology and media was very potent. I enjoyed it. It had a lot of benefits. It felt, certainly when I started down that path, I thought it was a path where I could contribute and be of service, and all these new technologies were going to have positive effect in the world. So I felt on one level that I was sort of on my path. And about 20 years into my business career, I started on a contemplative and inner journey, not instigated by just questioning, but of course a response to a trauma. And this is long before, my marriage situation shifted. So at that time, I had dear friends who were kind enough to point me in the direction of meditation and yoga as a healing modality, and started down this contemplative path that continued to sort of gather energy and have meaning for me. I got deeper and deeper into it as a practitioner, then as a teacher.
Meaning yoga, yes.
Yoga and meditation. As a teacher of teachers, and continued to want more of that in my life because that felt really fulfilling and purposeful. But I still had this business life. So for many years, I was sort of running on parallel tracks. And then as 5-6 years ago, I was like, nah, this really, like, I need to put whatever energy I have into a consolidated way of being of service in the world, but that incorporated both of these aspects of my life. And that was the genesis of the Center for Compassionate Leadership. But, there were these separate parts of me that were doing my thing. And it was less about what am I going to do in the future, more about how am I going to bring integration into my life, because I was starting to recognize that integration and wholeness was something that was lacking
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
how I was being in the world.
And I would say that is such a common theme that I hear with my clients, younger through coming up to the 50s. It starts big time 40s, but then 50s and 60s for sure. And I just want to interject here because that's Kimberly's story a bit too.
Well, yeah. I mean, but I got into yoga and meditation. I had a brain tumor in law school and got deep into, I went the holistic route, and, they were telling me I was going to die. And, and I just, I started to do yoga and meditation, and I just, it was, I got deep into it, and still practice both, and went from being a lawyer to having a chain of gyms, and so still haven't quite got the the total integration like the two of you, but I'm trying.
Well, no, but by putting together yoga and spin,
Yeah.
and your business and legal acumen, I would say that's a pretty good integration. So
Always working on it.
oh yeah, it's always working.
I wish I could say that yes, we got the total integration down. But we view ourselves as separate selves, and I think that's where we really, and this is especially true in American culture, is that we don't really recognize how deeply connected we are to each other, and we don't allow ourselves to lean into that deep interconnection, because we do want to distinguish ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But when I look at what would, quote, distinguish me, so much of it is dependent upon everyone who's come before me, other people's ideas, maybe somewhere along the way something gets expressed subtly differently, but we're all dependent upon each other, and that's the hard part, I think. It's just is really allowing oneself to grab onto that communal.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that you thought that way before in your financial career?
I was definitely thinking even more as more of a separate self back then.
Right.
But I think that's part of what encouraged me or pushed me, nudged me to move away from that.
Mm-hmm.
Is to move towards something which initially was just probably wanting to set myself apart in a different way. I think that until we're really trying to bring all of us together, it's still a little bit of a tilting at windmills. But so I could establish myself in a financial career, but that's not as meaningful as if I went to a different. Well, it's not about establishing myself. It's about just leaning into the present moment.
Which I would probably posit wasn't at the foremost of your mind in those earlier days in your career.
No, not at all.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. We know that as humans develop, our values take, increasing front and center momentum in our lives, right? That what really comes to matter to us is our personal values, right?
Right.
And having some sort of generativity or whatnot. You see Luke's tail wagging. He's nodding. It resonates.
Good. Go beat it.
So, yeah, what is it like now to be working together on this wonderful venture of the Center for Compassionate Leadership?
It truly feels like a miracle to me, because when we did establish our personal relationship, it had nothing to do with that. And
this was like a glimmer in your eye when you met. This wasn't even happening yet, right?
It was right. Little pieces and sparkles were coming together, and it was starting to take shape and form.
Right.
And because Evan had so much beautiful nonprofit experience, I'd be like, hey, what do you think about this or that or this or that? And, as time went on, it became increasingly clear that this is what we both cared about. And wouldn't it be wonderful for him to come over all the time and work with me on it full time? However, we were sort of newly partnered in life, and we're like, we don't want to mess that up, because that was the greatest gift of all. So it took a few months of like working our way through the details. But now that we're in this flow and have been on this path together for 3.5 years full time, like really bringing the work forward, and we recognize each other's strengths and weaknesses, and we're very complementary in terms of what we do and how we do it. So it's been such an interesting dance to see how we combine what we each bring to the party, and then how we, bring it forward in the world. And it's been a remarkable journey.
And I think Laura said something really, really important. We recognize each other's strengths and weaknesses. And I think that's what makes working together so risky, is you have to be able to and be willing to be completely vulnerable and open. And which then extends into the work we do with the leadership development work that we do, which is, how do you allow people to be seen in their complete selves, weaknesses and strengths, and nurture them along. So we have a trusting relationship, which we've been able to develop, which is just a gift.
Sure.
That then allows us to be a little more vulnerable with each other, because I know that if I open up and reveal a draft of something that's poorly written, which many of my first drafts are, that I'm not going to be humiliated by Laura's response. But we can do that with everybody if we choose to be kind and generous. It's just really easy to be kind and generous to the ones you love and to the ones who are in your circle. So can we just keep expanding that circle of safety, really? And I mean, that's what has been great for me, is it's allowed me to learn so much about what it means to feel safe, and therefore, by inference, how can I help offer and create safety for others?
Yeah. Wow. I love that. I mean, that's what really strikes me in this conversation is kind of embracing the uncertainty and being willing to take risks and open up, right? And try new things. Which,
by the way, includes not always succeeding.
Right.
Taking risks means you have to put yourself out there. And perfectionism is a real challenge to getting things done, because what we do is then we stay way, way, way far away from risk, because failure is so costly to us, so traumatic to us. And so what you just described, Daisy, I completely agree with. We've got to be willing to put ourselves out there and take risks and go for it.
Yeah.
So, Evan, do you have suggestions for people in their 60s to, be able to do that? I mean, can you give us a tip or some advice on that? I know I would use it.
I mean, it's I'll use a story from an ancient Zen story. The novice comes to the temple to learn, and the teacher comes in, and the novice says, "I'm here to learn. Teach me." And the teacher says, "Have you finished your rice?" And the novice says, "Yes." Teacher says, "Then wash your bowl." The only advice I have is just take one more step. I mean, you're an athlete. I remember one of the best pieces of athletic advice I ever got was from a fellow runner who said, the hardest step on any race or any training day is that first step out of bed. It's just move, get in motion. Yeah. And we want to do it right, and I want to do it right, and there's certainly this is not counter to that at all, but I think that we don't know what's right until we just take another step and another step. So that's I think that's what I would recommend.
No, that's good advice.
Wash your bowl.
Yeah. How about you, Laura?
For me, a lot of it was getting over fear. And I think what Evan's just described in terms of taking a first step, any step, is something that helps sort of move you through the fear. But I think first I had to actually face and name all that was really causing mountains to be the visual in front of me instead of like these nice paths through the mountains. So again, it took a lot of inner versing, if you will.
Yeah.
Really getting inside myself and getting clear about what truly mattered to me. What you said before, Daisy, about our values, absolutely. It's like, what truly are my priorities for the rest of this life, however long that may be. And I think once I got clear on that and started taking baby steps, and not to have an expectation or an outcome, just to do the practice every day as we come back to practice, but just to show up, but to show up differently and sort of getting through that, crossing that threshold of initial fear. Not that there isn't fear of the unknown all the time, or like what's going to happen, or am I going to fail, or what are people going to think of me? Letting go of some of those old stories, like, I don't really give a hoot what people think of me anymore. And I look back and think, oh my God, that sort of defined my life for decades.
Sure.
How powerful that was in terms of creating, a container that wasn't really even there other than in my mind. So finding these capacities to embrace courageous action, to do it with self-compassion, and to have a community of support.
Yeah.
Because this is never a trip we do on our own.
Right. Yeah, and how important it is I mean, gosh, if I hadn't had your friendship in 2015, when going through so many changes, and I mean, it just speaks to how important it is to be willing to let people in when you know you need it. Yeah. It's very touching. I'm so grateful that you could share this story with us. Stories. So we're asking our guests if there are any books that they want to recommend to listeners or anything else.
I am enamored with Dacher Keltner's latest book on awe. It's just delicious. It's full of practical, for everybody who has no patience to sit and meditate for 20 minutes. It's like, well, the science now really says maybe you don't have to. Maybe you just need to have these awe-filled moments. And, there's so much science in the book. It's beautiful, as well as these deep personal stories. And Dacher talks about how the passing of his younger brother was really his impetus for writing the book. And I too recently lost my younger brother, and how seeking these moments of awe has been sort of one of the major ways for me to cope with the grief and the overwhelm, because it is such a deep journey to walk through. So I highly recommend Awe by Dacher.
Thank you. Yeah, that's wonderful. And you live right near that massive Atlantic Ocean. Pretty awe-inspiring.
Every day.
Yeah.
Every day.
How about you, Evan?
So if Laura's going to pick a new release, I'll pick something out of the library. I'll recommend "Be Here Now" by Ram Dass.
Oldie but goodie.
A classic.
A classic.
Well-deserved classic.
And that's right. And with just such great wisdom about where we do need to find ourselves. And it's the two books are obviously deeply connected, because I think the practice of awe really helps us to be anchored in this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Daisy, Kimberly.
So
what a beautiful idea to be sharing these stories with those of us blessed enough to come into our 60s and beyond.
Yeah, exactly. What a tremendous gift. And to, in a way, start again, but with so much more perspective and wisdom. The old adage, right? Youth is wasted on the young. Now we can say, well, we got it all.
Thanks for listening to the 60 Plus Best Life podcast. We hope you've learned useful and inspiring information today. We welcome your comments and also your suggestions of topics we need to discuss. If you know of someone you'd like to hear on our podcast, please share. We think of this podcast as a way to grow a robust community of people who are making life better at 60 plus. People who are living their best life. Thanks again for listening to, subscribing, and sharing the 60 Plus Best Life podcast.